Why moving on feels impossible. But actually, it's not impossible. You will be able to move on. I can guarantee that. It's just a question of not mindset, not being smart, not being detached. It's just a question of looking at things for what they are. And the reason most people have a hard time moving on is because they are self-gaslighting what's going on in their life. They're not trusting their judgment. And this video is here to give you some insights, some nuggets of insights to really help you figure out, okay, this is why I have a hard time. I really want to give you the keys to help you move on, design the right relationship for you. And we're going to talk about self-gaslighting. So self-gaslighting is when someone questions their own reality, their own feelings, their own experiences. And in a way, it's a form of emotional abuse that can occur, that we do to ourselves when we internalize the abuse you've experienced. This is the extreme case of abusive relationship, but in some cases, when you have insecurities, when you have a difficult breakup, there's always a temptation to self-gaslight what's going on and to second-guess yourself and to create this emotional abuse on yourself. You're not only self-sabotaging, so we talk about self-sabotaging relationships. Here is you're self-sabotaging the process of healing. And that's why it's so hard for you to move on, is because you are actually the person preventing you from moving forward. That's why it's important to unlock this should you want to move on. So why self-gaslighting keeps you stuck? There is this, maybe I was too needy. Maybe I said this. Maybe I said that. You rewrite the reality. You make yourself the victim. When you deal with an avoidant, they trigger insecurity, right? They tell you you're too needy. They make you feel your needs are sort of unrealistic. You feel like, oh yeah, but I was, asking for too much, right? No, that was just not the right person, or he or she wouldn't give you what you expected or deserved in terms of a relationship. Remember that being in love is not about convincing someone to love you. Maybe that's conditional, maybe that's familiar to some of the patterns that you grew up with when you were a child, but that doesn't have to be now. Also, and that's very important, your emotions throughout the relationship, after the relationship, were real. It's not because they dismiss them, it's not because you don't trust yourself that they are not real. And today, I want you to recognize this, accept those emotions, and potentially today, together, we can process those emotions. The healing process, and the reason you have a hard time moving on at this stage, is because you don't trust. It's not about trusting your ex, it's trusting yourself. Trusting yourself, trusting what happened, trusting your reality. In other words, being objective. And it's very hard to be objective when you're in love with someone. That's why people who helped you, your friends, your family, maybe your therapist, they will have an objective view on what's going on. They will be able to show you some of the blind spots, to recognize the things that you don't want to be aware of because you're self-gaslighting yourself. So that's the first element here. And it's very important for you to recognize this. Now, something very important that I keep on repeating when you date an avoidant, you fell for their potential, not the reality. Very often people, when I have calls with them, whether it's like initial calls or the first few sessions, they would tell me like, I know they could make me happy. I know we could have something. But I always ask them like, but have they really, consistently gave you what you needed? No, at the beginning, maybe a little bit, but I know they can. Yeah, but have they? No, but I know they can, but have they? And we get to this idea of you are hooked to the potential, to something that could have happened. And that's the thing is the inconsistency of them selling you something, not being consistent, the highs, the lows, keep you chase for validation. Again, it feels familiar for anxiously attached people, but that's not healthy. You know, the highs and the lows. Highs intoxicating, the lows crushing. And when we think about it, like, why would I go after a relationship that keeps me feel bad about myself? It's because of the highs and the lows. You know, if they just open up, if they could commit, if they could be more emotional, and so on and so forth. Yes, if, it depends on them. You shouldn't be the one forcing them, pushing them. It should come from them. I'm a dismissive avoidant, former dismissive avoidant. I took the decision to work on my insecurities. Yes, it happened after years of struggle, of not knowing what I wanted, of not being aware of this. But at some stage, at some day, I realized like I need to do something about it. And no one would do the work for me. That doesn't work like this. And the problem is that when you care, when you're an empath, and you're dating someone who has wounds and insecurities, you want to fix them. You want to help them. But the real question is like, are they willing to do the work? Is it your role to help them? Right? The point is this element of growth. I can assume that if you're watching this video, you're into working on yourself. You're interested in personal development. You want to become the best version of yourself. Right? What about them? What about them? How can you be happy in a relationship where you don't share this mindset, which is a very simple mindset? But you have to accept that some people, they are not interested in that. They just do things the way they do things. And take it or leave it is their mantra. So accept that you're choosing to grow and maybe they're not. You can't do that for them. That's very important. And that's one of the things you need to let go of. And the grieving process sometimes starts with that. When you're grieving a relationship with an avoidance, is that that's not your role to fix them. Yes, maybe it's very simple in your mind. The solution is obvious. If only they see a therapist. If only they could talk about their childhood. If only they could accept that they have insecurities. If only. If only. So let them do it. Because if they don't, what you are picturing is a fallacy, is a potential, is an idea. A relationship is not an idea, it's something concrete. A secure relationship is about consistency. I released a book called The Secure Base on how to create the right relationship with an avoidant partner when you have an anxious avoidant partner, an anxious avoidant dynamic. It's not about an idea. It's not about like something on paper. It's practical things you can implement in your life, in your relationship, to feel safe. To have this pragmatic empathy of, I know your world, you know mine. Therefore, we can speak the same language. Yes, we're different. I'm an avoidant, you're an anxious, and that's fine. Because I know that in those situations, I need to do this. I know that in those situations, I need to connect with you. I need to force myself to open up, to discuss things, etc., etc., etc. But you can't expect that person to do it for you. And you can't expect them to heal because you force them, you push them. That doesn't work like this. And if you look back at the relationship, maybe you abandon yourself to keep them. Maybe in some occasions, you silenced your needs because you didn't want to sound too demanding. Maybe you over-explain things. Maybe this idea of walking on eggshells, something that people always tell me. I didn't want to discuss this. Discuss about the future, discuss about moving on, discuss about intimacy. I felt I was walking on eggshells. This is a sign that it's not a healthy relationship. You don't want to be in a relationship where you feel every single evening when you get back from work, you're walking on eggshells, not scared of talking about things that matter to you. You know, if you think about it for a second, the person you share your life with should be the first person you would want to talk about things that matter to you. So why? Why are we keeping stuck on those? Right, that's the thing. This video is to help you realize things that you were doing that are not right for you. And if they're not right for you, there's no point having those lingering feelings with this person. And so the part of the process here is rediscovering yourself. What do I need? What do I want? What's the ideal relationship? Because if you lose yourself in the process and you leave that person in that relationship, it's very hard to heal. It's very hard to move forward because you've attached yourself, your identity to this relationship. And guess what? This relationship is not right for you. Reclaim yourself and pave the way for the right relationship. Also, if you dated an avoidant, and now that if you're watching my video and if you're not familiar, watch all of my videos, but all the videos on the subject, there's plenty of content creators on that. The distance is not about your fault. It's not about you being demanding or anxious. It's their pattern. So yes, sometimes it's just a question of recalibration and giving them enough space, but don't take things personally, okay? It's not your fault. It's a dynamic. The anxious avoidant trap is a dynamic. It doesn't really matter who started it. It's a dynamic. Now, it's really important to acknowledge this. Healing means you have to choose you. It's not about waiting for them. Choose yourself. I could end the video here, but it's very important. But I have other things to say. But it's super important. That's an important reminder. If you're having a hard time right now, you have to choose yourself. And investing in therapy, watching videos like this, reading books, it's choosing you. It's also about this element of control. The problem with people having a hard time after a breakup is because they attach the control, the narrative to their ex, right? And how can you feel if every single of your actions, every single of your thoughts depends on someone's will or someone's willingness to do things, someone's availability? No, that's not the right way to look at things. Reclaim things. Choose yourself. That's the first step. Let's talk about our emotional response and almost the physiological response. Your nervous system mistakes chaos for love. This is a very important thing to help you understand why you shouldn't sometimes trust your gut. Avoidance, as we discussed, they create this push-pull cycle. And these push-pull cycles feels addictive. The reason it's addictive is because the highs and the lows create dopamine spikes. The dopamine spikes is what is usually because of the difference between the highs and the lows. The other way around, if you are in a secure relationship, if I take an extreme case, someone who is always attracted to the chaotic relationships, if that person meets someone secure, predictable, who cares, who communicates, who's transparent, the highs and the lows, the difference, the delta will be lower. And you wouldn't have the spikes in dopamine. You will have oxytocin, you will have a feeling of safety, but if you have an anxious attachment style, you associated love with those spikes of dopamine, which is not love. It's passion, the inconsistency, etc., etc. The mystery and things like that, which is very typical of beginning of relationships, but that's not love. So you need to recognize that, hold on, if I felt this way, if I feel attracted to this kind of patterns, it's not so much about love, it's about this dopamine spike. That's important because if you want to have a healthy relationship, finding someone who could be there for you, you shouldn't disregard people who have a secure attachment style. And it happens quite frequently for people who have an anxious attachment style to dismiss people feeling like, he's boring. I texted him, we had a date, and he texted me the next day. How needy of him, right? Again, I'm making very simplistic examples, but I have in mind a very good friend of mine who's like this. And it's very hard to let go of this pattern of like, why are you attracted to people who are not available? Who are married, who are living abroad, giving you the highs and the lows. Because, they crave that. It's an addiction, and it's a very dangerous addiction. Because that's not what you need should you want to have a healthy relationship. Maybe you just want to have one night stands and not have any sort of long-term relationships. That's fine, but you have to be aware of that. So again, the process is to teach your nervous system, recalibrate, relearn your nervous system that chaos is not the right relationship for you. Something that you developed at a young age with your parents, with your caregivers, something that you need to retrain because that's not healthy. So it's always the difference between how you feel the system 1 brain, primitive part of the brain, with the analytical part of the brain. Okay, as an adult, as someone who wants to be happy, as someone who wants to invest in a relationship, what's right for me? And usually the disconnection is about how we can align that system 2 brain, the one watching the video, the one perhaps taking notes and learning about this, aligning this with the system 1 brain, the primitive part of our brain. And the problem is that moving on sometimes feel like you are losing the fantasy. Moving on means that you have to end a dream. Losing a dream. When you grieve a relationship, what's the hardest part to grieve is not the past, it's the future. Again, we're in this idea of the potential, what we could have had. It's usually the hardest part to grieve, is the future, is the project that we had. And when I say the project that we have, let me know in the comment section. Was it the project that you guys have, or the project that only you had? Be really objective on this. Were they mutual things or just personal things? Sometimes we project what we wanted, but that's not necessarily something that was shared with our partner. And again, deep down you thought, but they would change. Things would be different. The problem is, and again, that's a wake-up call here, you shouldn't be in a relationship where you are constantly trying to fill the gap between where your partner is and when your partner needs to be. When I mean needs to be, in terms of meeting your own needs, in terms of the relationship you deserve. Because you deserve consistent love. You deserve someone who is there, who shows up, who fights for you. Right? It sounds very obvious, but again, if you have an anxious attachment style and you're having a hard time letting go of this relationship, be objective on this. Was I fighting too hard? Was I trying to sort of address his or her shortcomings to finally get my needs met? And it's very important to ask yourself those questions. Because that fantasy is not a relationship. That's a fantasy. That's something that never really materialized. And maybe you feel like, but at the beginning of the relationship, that was like this. Yes, the beginning of a relationship is not the right period to assess the potential of a relationship. The beginning of a relationship is usually driven by high dopamine intensity, passionate love, but that's not a secure love. Long-term relationships, people who've been together for 20 years, they need to be able to spark the flame and reignite that passion. But if you have a hard time letting go of this relationship, you also need to recognize that that's not a relationship. You need both. You need that passionate element and you need this commitment element. That's very important. Letting go is not about losing. You're not losing anything. Because it's a dream. This is not real. Letting go, it's about reclaiming yourself. Starting from who you are. What you want as a person, what you deserve. as a relationship. We're gonna have a weekly challenge. I don't know yet, but when I will be releasing this video, have a look in the description. It's something totally free. The idea is to get people who are in similar situations together, where we can work together, discuss together, where you can ask me questions. We'll probably have some calls about that, totally free, to really help you get unstuck. I'll probably attach a mini course to this self-gaslighting, moving on elements and framework. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. Have a look in the description to join the community, and I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself.